Hi there, I'm Lori Davis. I am a sex counselor and I'm also a nurse practitioner who specializes in holistic sexual health. So when I say that, people often say, well, what the heck is that? What does that mean? And what I would say on a really practical basis is it means that I just think about and talk about sex with people all day, every day. And honestly, it's the best job ever, right? I couldn't imagine doing anything differently. I love my work, and it's such a privilege to be able to support people in this way. So people say, okay, well, you talk about sex all day. What the frick are you talking about, right? What are people saying to you? And well, of course, people are telling me all kinds of things. They're telling me about their very best sexual experiences. They're telling me about their worst sexual experiences, honestly. They're telling me about their fetishes and their kinks, the things that bring them joy, the things that bring them shame, right? But what I hear most of all is that people are longing for something different, right? They just really want some kind of change in their sex lives. They want sex more, or they want it less, or they don't want any sex. They want to do certain things that they don't know how to tell their partner about, or maybe their partner's not into it. I mean, it comes in all different varieties. But ultimately, people feel like they're stuck. You know, that's the folks that I see. And I think we all recognize this experience, right? That we feel stuck in the way we're thinking about a problem. And every time it comes up, we just do the same round and round thought process in our head, or we have the same conversation with our partners, and we get nowhere, right? Fundamentally, we're stuck. And maybe you're feeling that way right now. Maybe you're feeling that way too. And you're not alone, you know? I have definitely felt that way before. And honestly, I think it's kind of just one of those things that's a feature of being human and trying to have sex with other people, right? And trying to make that work long term for us. So you might be saying like, great, Lori, thanks a lot for pointing out the obvious and the fact that we're having a problem here, but what is to be done about this, right? So I think the answer is that we need to change our minds, right? We need to change how we're thinking in order to get unstuck. And when I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, well, how do I help someone get unstuck? What's the core of it, you know? And I had all kinds of different ideas, and that's a good thing, right? Because that means there's just a lot of different ways to go about this. But what I'm gonna give you in this video are the top 5 ways, from my opinion, of how to get unstuck sexually. So these are some places to start. So why don't we get started now? All right, so number one. So for me, the first way to get unstuck was an obvious choice. Really, there was only one thing that I was gonna put on the top of the list, and that's because this is a method that you take with you throughout the rest of all the other methods, and really you take with it throughout the rest of your life. And that method is, drumroll please, slow down. Slow down, okay? That's it, slow down. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I love the rushing parts of sex, right? All the rushing and the desire and the passion and the bodices ripping and all that kind of stuff. Like, I love that, and I would never, ever, ever suggest that you get rid of it. But what I am saying is that when you feel stuck, that is not a time to rush, right? And I see this all the time, like when people get stuck. And by what I mean by that is like they're frustrated, they're angry, they're resentful, they're triggered, they're withdrawn or resistant, you know? All of this like things that come up when you feel stuck in a pattern. That happens, right? And then it's like they just want to go faster, right? You like brace yourself, brace your shoulders, lock the jaw, and we're just going to go faster and get in there and get it done. And that just doesn't work, okay? So think about it like this, right? You've been in a car before and you've been like stuck in the mud, and we all have that experience where we're like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna hit the accelerator faster, right? I'm gonna slam my foot on the accelerator and I'm gonna get out of here. And then what you find is that like, oh, well, actually I'm more stuck in the mud, and now my car is covered with mud, and so are these like innocent bystanders, right? So this is a little bit like how it is with sex. So when you feel stuck, right? When you get that feeling, it is not a cue to go faster. Being stuck is a cue to slow down, all right? So you wanna slow down, take a breath, like where are my shoulders in space? Where's the rest of my body in space? Where am I? Where's my partner? Like what's my intention right here, right? So slowing down helps you get real, basically. Slowing down helps you get present. It helps you be more vulnerable, and maybe helps you find what's like lurking underneath that stuck feeling, right? All that anger and anxiousness and withdrawing and triggering, right? So slowing down is the central method in getting unstuck. You got to slow down to go deeper, slow down to go farther, and really slow down to have better sex, period. All right, that's number one. So number two, I want you to think about caring for the body. So changing your mind is often most effectively accomplished, by changing the body, right? So mind and body are completely interconnected. And we know this, right? Obvious, right? But it's nowhere does it show up more than in our sexuality. So if you aren't functioning well, if medications are mucking up your sexual response, if your nervous system is overwhelmed with stress and burnout, like your mind is not going to show up sexually because your body is not going to show up sexually, right? And so one way to go about changing the mind is to care for the body so that mind-body connection can flow, right? So you want to think about, how can I be more physically healthy so that I can be more optimally present when sex, for my sex life. This is what holistic sexual health is really all about, right? And I love this aspect of my work. I work with people to help them figure out, how is my physical body functioning? And is there anything about that is a barrier for me in my sexuality, right? And then figuring out what to do about that, what's possible, and when I say function optimally, I don't mean that you have to function perfectly, right? People with all kinds of physical and mental health conditions have great sex, right? It's not that you have to function perfectly. It's just that you need to make sure that your body is getting the nourishment and support that it needs for where it's at, okay? So take an opportunity to reflect on your own health, but also seek support. Right? You can go to a sexual medicine specialist, or you can work with other folks from many, many other disciplines to get at this, but seek support for sexual health, your physical health, to change your mind, right? And get you unstuck sexually. All right, so that's 2 down. Number 3, work with your inner critic, okay? So when we are stuck sexually, the mind often responds with an avalanche of negativity, okay? So, we all have that inner critic, right? That all makes sense. We know that person, right? We've worked with it or not to, in our lives. And what I know is that when sex isn't going well, the inner critic gets really agitated. I mean, the inner critic wants to jump in there and start narrating everything in the worst possible light. So what might this look like, right? So you're in a situation, and then the sexual problem that you're worried about, or that's keeping you stuck, shows up, right? So I don't have an erection. I'm having pain with sex. I don't want to do what my partner wants to do, but I don't know how to tell them. I want to do a lot of other things, but I'm too ashamed to bring it up. I don't like the way my partner's touching me now. I just feel like there's too much performance. I feel like I got to perform instead of being present. Whatever it is that's showing up in your particular situation. So the alarm bells go off, and then the inner critic jumps in, and the inner critic is going to add to that. So it's going to say, oh, I'm broken, I'm a loser, everyone else knows how to do sex, I'm the only one who doesn't know how to do it, my partner's never going to figure it out, I'm never going to be able to be like whole sexually, I'm broken, basically. Like I'm broken and I'm the only one, right? And it's never going to get better. And so the critic's just like rushing in there with all of these negative words. Now, for some people, it's not so much words. It might be like a movie that plays where the movie gets started and it sort of runs off in like a million different worst case scenarios, right? And so this is like a negativity bias, right? The brain sees a problem and it wants to jump in with this negative response. And this propensity to go with the negative critic and to assume the worst about the situation really, is honestly like basically the very best way to gum up your mental works and to get stuck sexually. So if you want to change your mind, get unstuck, have better sex, the first step is you got to chuck this negative thinking out, right? So slowing down, right? Step number 1, slow down, notice what's happening, give some acceptance, right? We don't want to be criticizing the inner critic. That's not going to get us very far. have some acceptance and compassion, and then figure out like what's gonna take for me to chuck out this stuff. What's it gonna take for me to stop talking to myself this way? There are lots of ways to do that, too many to go into in this short talk, but I would encourage you to look around and try to find something that feels like it's stirring up a little loving kindness for yourself. Because the idea is that where negative thoughts want to hold you down and drag you down and get you stuck, positive thoughts, or even just more realistic thoughts, are the energy that actually gets things moving, okay? So work with the inner critic. Number 4, one of my favorites, define your sexual vocabulary. So we're just talking a little bit about words, right? How we talk to ourselves and words matter and we got to get rid of these negative words. Well, there are other ways in which words matter too. So the mind makes sense of the world through words to a large extent, right? But we don't often pay that much attention to the words that we're using, right? We just assume that first we assume that I know what I mean when I say something, and I also assume that you know what I mean. And for God's sakes, my partner knows what I mean when I say X, Y, or Z, right? But confusion about what we mean when we talk about sex in particular is so common, and it is a big part of what keeps us stuck. So in my experience, simple words that we all take for granted will trip us up day in and day out, right? And keep us unknowingly locked in these repetitive cycles. So why don't we try to see if we can experience that a little bit? So let's take one of the words that we use most commonly when we talk about sex, and that would be the word sex itself. So what do you mean when you say the word sex? So I'm going to give you a second now. We're going to slow down. We're going to practice step 1. And I want you to think, what comes up for you when I ask, what do you mean when you say the word sex? I'll give you a second. Got it all figured out? Probably not, right? And that's because it turns out actually that sex is really hard to define. And what I want to argue is that that's actually probably a really good thing, right? It's probably a really good thing for your sex life. So let's think about that. I'm not sure what came up for you, right? And but let's just think about what most commonly comes up. So if you're a heterosexual person, what most commonly comes up when you think, what is sex? It's penis and vagina, right? Sex, yeah, it means lots of different things, but what we really mean when we say, do you want to have sex, is, do you want to do the penis and vagina thing? And that's even when we know that like that really doesn't quite add up, right? Like, doesn't oral sex count as sex? I mean, it seems a lot like sex. Like, what about all the other like erotic, sexy, playful things that we do that feel so good? Like, is that only foreplay and it's only sex if we like actually get the penis and vagina? Like, that's the only time it like counts and we get to like check the box that we had sex. For other types of couples, right? Queer, gay, lesbian, polyamorous couples, all kinds of different couples, sex means different things, right? But there's usually some essential act that has to occur for sex to have been done, right? So whether it's anal sex or oral sex or using a vibrator, for a lot of people it means orgasm. So do you want to do sex when I say sex, I mean orgasm, right? And that doesn't really add up either, because if orgasm is defining sex, then there's lots of situations where one person is having sex and another person is not having sex, right? So the point is not to run around in metaphysical, like philosophical circles trying to figure out the definition of sex, right? The idea is to take a beat and wonder a little bit, like, hey, what do I mean when I say I'm having a problem with this sex thing? Like, what am I actually talking about? In so doing, you're going to learn a lot about yourself, and you're also going to learn about your partner, and you're also going to improve communication, right? So you're all getting on the same page. So the method there is just to say, like, what is my like first reaction to what is sex, for instance, right? If we're going with this example, what's my knee-jerk reaction? And just to notice that, right? You don't have to beat yourself up about that. Just notice it, accept it, and then say, is this really what I believe, right? Is this really what I believe? And if it's not, like, what do I believe? If this isn't serving me well, what could serve me well, right? So the idea is that if we can't come up with like the perfect definition for sex, that's great, because that means who gets to decide what sex is for you? You get to decide that. So sometimes that can feel a little overwhelming. Like, I don't know, how am I just supposed to decide what sex is for me? So let me give you a couple of leading questions. So one would be, what do you want to feel during sex? What do you want to feel during sex? What are some of the components that are really important for you? You know, people commonly say pleasure or intimacy, maybe. People also think a lot about behaviors, right? Where are the genitals? What are the external movements? What are the kinks and fetishes we're bringing in, right? But really what I think is helpful is to think about, like, how do I want to feel during sex? You know, Esther Perel says that sex isn't something you do, it's a place you go. So where do you go during sex? What is that that's happening for you, right? What is it bringing up out of you in your sexual authenticity, right? So yeah, a little bit less about genitals and a little bit more about this internal experience. If that's not really jogging anything for you, maybe think about a really great sexual experience. Think about something that was magnificent. And again, using the same questions, what did I feel inside? Where did I shift internally? What experiences were available to me during that sex that aren't available in other types of sex? And then finally, if that's not helpful, just think about pleasure. You know, if I didn't focus on orgasm during sex, what other kinds of pleasures would be available to me? Like, what do I love? You know, and how can I expand what sex is to include that too? So that could seem kind of esoteric. Okay, all right, well, we've come up with an idea of like what we think sex is. How's that supposed to help? What I would say is think of this example. Think about when you're initiating sex, or sex is being initiated towards you. So someone's, you know, doing this, like, do you want to, you know, with the raised eyebrows, do the sex thing? What is being asked there? You know, when you're asking your partner that, or you're hearing that from your partner, what are you hearing, right? Is it, do you want to put a penis can I put my penis in your vagina? Or is it, do you want to have an orgasm with me? Or are you feeling horny? Like, I don't know. It's like, what is that question? And I think how that question comes across means a lot about how people respond to it and whether or not they want to do any of it. So what if a couple had actually sat and thought about this a little bit, and they knew that when someone said, do you want to have sex, or insinuated it, that they meant, I don't know, let's see, how about like, do you want to engage in some like creative erotic play that's like really focused on pleasure and intimacy and emotional connection, without any real like focus on goal-oriented things like orgasm? You can see that like comes across a little bit differently, like, than the question, do you want to have sex, if it means that, can I put my penis in your vagina? You know, so opening up this word really opens up the experience and starts to change our minds, right? And changing how we think about sex. So get curious, right? Think about how slowing down and thinking about what you really mean sexually with this word of sex, you know, or it could be about desire, it could be intimacy, it could be, you know, orgasm, even, like any of the words around sexuality, anything that's relevant for you. What do those words mean? And how can expanding those meanings for yourself and really like creatively defining it for yourself help you change your mind about sex, help you change your partner's mind about your sex life, and get this moving again for you. All right, we've come up to the last one, number 5. Okay, number 5 is learn more. Okay, so you do not have to go this alone. All right. People throughout history have been wondering about and thinking about and writing about and creating art about sex, right? People have been trying to figure out how to live an authentic sex life, right? When I say learn more, I don't necessarily mean go watch porn. I don't necessarily mean go buy new sex toys and learn how to use them. That might be really relevant for you at certain stages along the way, but there's more to learning than just learning new techniques and new positions, right? So take a cue from some of the vast array of human culture that have commented and worked on this question, right? So we've got poets who are waxing poetically. We've got philosophizers philosophizing about sex. We have artists drawing, painting, right? Creating, you know, installations in museums, all kind of like making comments and understanding the nuances of sexuality. We also have scientists, right, of every persuasion who are doing experiments and researching and learning about the basics of sex, learning about the sociology of sex. All of that stuff is relevant in lots of different ways to your actual sexual experience. You know, there are tons of writers out there. I've already mentioned Esther Perel, but like folks like Emily Nagoski, right? Writers, sex educators who are changing what we understand about sex, what we understand about what is normal, right? And offering us a new vision for sexuality, a new vision and possibilities for our own pleasure. There's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, right? Like this one. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to access this information. And I say, do it, right? Because learning new things about sex is one of the best ways to like shake up this mental landscape, right? To change the mind and get unstuck. So learn from the great masters, not just from porn stars, right? Learn from the new researchers, okay? And this is a big part of what I think I do. Like I think of myself as like a guide, you know, I don't know everything about sex. No one does, right? Sex is something that we probably will never, ever like fully understand because there's just something about it that's, you know, there's a darkness in there and there's paradoxes in there. And that's what makes it so exciting, right? But it just means that there isn't a perfect answer for everyone. Like that's something that is, it's something that you get to decide. It's something that you get to explore and work on, but don't go it alone, right? Take some advice. Take advice from people who've been working on this, thinking about this, researching this, all right? So we have gone through 5 ways to change your mind, right? We're gonna slow down, right? What is number 2? Oh, take care of the body. Number 3 is like chuck the negativity and the inner critic. Number 4 is pay attention, right? Work with sexual vocabulary, define it for yourself. And then number 5 is learn more, get help, get support. So that's it. Those are my 5 ways to change your mind. I wish you guys the best of luck. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you're interested in working with me, please know that you can always book a free consult and you'll get on the phone and with me directly and we'll figure out if it's a good fit. All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.